We've designated this week as Happy Awareness Week in recognition of all the great work that's going on in the sector to develop to the happy design principles, both in terms of the way we build our homes, but also the types of services that run in the local communities as well. And to kick that off last week, Lord Best wrote a little blog for us. So if you haven't seen it, do check out that on our website. But this morning's session is all about communities that care and share and different aspects. And I'm going to hand over to Paula. Paula's been a long-term supporter of the Housing LIN. I'm really delighted that Lifestyle Energy are with us. And Paula, over to you.
I'll take myself off mute. Good morning, everybody. And just to sort of echo what Jeremy said, it's great to be here. It's great that we've used innovation and the digital world to sort of reach out and still connect with everybody. So we're really pleased to continue to not only be a sponsor, but continue to support and be involved in the Housing LIN's activity. I've got two great speakers here with me today in this session, which we're going to share our experiences, our learning, and also our thoughts for the future, because I think we want to get an awful lot out of today, and we want you to engage with us around, where from here. This year has been a very, very challenging year, but let's face it, in this sector, it's a continual challenge. We're hugely behind what we need to deliver as a country and as a society. So, how are we going to actually work together to achieve that? So we're going to have presentations this morning from Andrew Prickett, who is the head of residential at Faithful and Gould, and Faithful and Gould again are a sponsor. I'll have to just drop in here that Andrew's stepping in for Sue, because Sue's not stepping up to the fold and doing the presentation. So I just thought I'd get you for that one. And also David Rice, who's Business Development Director at Guinness Care, again, another great sponsor with the Guinness Partnerships, who have supported alongside ourselves. And we're going to cover the spectrum really around, the communities that care and share, by really diving into around the community side of things, what innovation there is in the industry, and also in relation to very much focusing around the services as well, and that track record in the services. So I think there's just a couple of things that I'd just sort of like to set the scene for you to think about as we go through this session. And we would really like your engagement in relation to questions. So yes, we're here in a sense as experts to share our experience, but we really want you to get as much as possible out of this session by posting your questions, of which we'll leave plenty of time at the end to pick up. But there's two incredibly pertinent facts that I think we need to keep at the forefront of our mind as we listen to this session and listen to speakers today. And that's that people over the age of 55 are the largest demographic in the UK. And there's a couple of key things there. One is that age-appropriate housing is a minority. So we've got a huge ageing demographic, but we haven't got age-appropriate housing in this country. So incidents in the home inevitably are leading to issues around health and well-being, that again, we've got huge challenges around how do we provide the services to ensure that we support those individuals that are faced with those challenges. The second fact is that we are in the middle of a climate emergency, and buildings alone account for 39% of all human greenhouse emissions in the world. So energy efficient proof homes are essential to reducing that carbon impact. So on them couple of notes, I'd like to hand over to Andrew, if you'd like to just go first in relation to just setting the scene and sharing with the audience your experience and learning from across the industry.
Thank you, Paula, that's great, thank you. If I can just share my slides. Okay, hopefully everyone can see those slides and we're good to go. Thank you again, Paula. So today, Faithful and Gould are talking around building our homes of the future, and that's an approach where we very much rely on three core factors. the ability to innovate, the ability to create, but also collaborate. And we work with many of you on this call today, but we do see new emergence in the market, particularly around technology, digital, both in support of creating the built assets, but also in the service and the operation of those assets. So we'd really like to use our time today to reflect, as we always do, on the approach to Christmas and entering into a new year, and to look forward and to discuss the opportunities, how together we can innovate, create and collaborate in delivering those homes and the communities that are so desperately needed across the UK. If we can get this right, we think, and I say we, that's a royal we, F&G, the panel, and hopefully I speak behalf of the sector, we think we can provide solutions that will mitigate some of the current market pressures that we're all experiencing and add some real value. And when I say value, I mean that in terms of value to our communities and in social value, value in terms of well-being, and picking up on some of the points Paul has already raised around the environment. And of course, we also need to create value in financial terms, both in creating the assets, but how we operate them. So Paul has already introduced myself, Andrew Prickett, Head of Residential in the UK. And there's a couple of familiar faces there, Sue Rugg and Terry Stocks, who I work with very closely and have supported Housing LIN over a number of years. Thank you to Sue for giving me the opportunity to present and to discuss with you this year. Sue and Terry are available in this virtual world and hopefully will support me if I have any really challenging questions. So just as a very quick overview, what do Faithful and Gould and what do our people do in this residential sector? Well, we seek to deliver the homes and the communities of the future. We work closely with clients, peer group consultants, central and local government, and of course, funds. We do offer a suite of core services that I'm sure you're all familiar with: project management, quantity surveying, building surveying, etc. But actually in recent years and moving forward, we see those core services really helping our clients to advise and influence the shape of the market and what good looks like. And today we just have 15 minutes, so we're going to explore some specifics around the influence of manufacturing and modern methods of construction, how what we do is aligned to our sustainability goals, and what that means for adding value to the communities and how we record social value. Well, I don't think it would be any presentation this year or debate if we didn't discuss what was influencing the construction industry. And of course, we have to start with Brexit and COVID. Whether we see a deal or a no deal scenario, I think we should all agree that we really need to push on and build the homes and create the communities that we really need. And we can only do this by innovating and collaborating and working more closely together. In regards to COVID, it was exciting news when I drove into the office this morning to hear that the first vaccinations were being undertaken in Coventry. And I think everything we do in this sector is ultimately about people and the environments that we live in and the communities, and creating communities where we feel safe, where we feel we can prosper, and where we can have some fun, because I think that's what life's all about, really. And while today may be focused on people approaching the later years, I think all of those points around being safe, being able to prosper and having some fun are relevant to all age groups and whatever stage of our life journey we're at. So what are we seeing that's really influencing our work and the sectors that we work in? Well, in 2017, the government wrote a white paper, and in that they talked about a broken housing market, the fact that the UK was in a housing crisis. And whilst Brexit and COVID and other market influences have been really challenging, and I'm sure we can all agree that we've really struggled at times with those challenges, it has also given us an opportunity to think and reflect and consider how we are going to move forward. So we've been using this opportunity to look hard at what we do and question what good looks like, or what we feel good looks like going forward. And I'd say to all of you, please use the chat and the Q&A function today to share your thoughts on what the future of this sector should look like in your opinion, and what you believe good looks like. And we can discuss that as a panel later. I think what is clear is that construction productivity has flatlined over the last 20 years. And while it's not presented very clearly on the screen, hopefully we can all see that the red line on the graph in the bottom left-hand corner reflects construction productivity. And in contrast, we can see that manufacturing in the UK has recorded the most significant growth, as reflected by the grey line at the top of the graph. So we can therefore conclude it would be appropriate for us all to consider how and why we can embrace manufacturing approaches in this sector. I say how, as we have lots of options, and the key to success is knowing when to continue to use our traditional construction techniques and approaches, and when to adapt manufacturing. And we've been helped by government in this decision making, as government have produced the Modern Methods of Construction Guide, which clearly sets out the 7 categories of MMC. I also said why would we use manufacturing? Well, we all love things to be tangible and measurable. We all like to monitor against matrix and key performance indicators. And why do we do that? Well, I think the underlying message is we do that because we want to see continued improvement. And when I look at advising clients around whether to use a traditional approach or an MMC approach, we often talk about 6 ways to monitor and review continued improvement. We talk about time, quality, predictability, health and safety, sustainability, and disruption. And for those of you that are more acute, you'll have noticed I didn't list cost in one of those 6, but cost is fundamentally important, both in terms of capital cost and also revenue. And we may explore that later in the Q&A. So what else has been influencing why we might use manufacturing or modern methods of construction techniques? Well, let's take this opportunity to pause and see what other sectors are doing and lessons learned. So looking at the line from government, it's very clear to see that government are leaning in on this agenda. They truly have their shoulder behind this. And when we look at other sectors such as transportation, health, education, justice, and defence, to some extent, they're all ahead of where we are. So we're playing a little bit of catch up. And in many instances, and in the government departments, we are moving to a presumption in favour of MMC over traditional ways. Where can MMC have its biggest impact and deliver that continued improvement that we spoke about earlier? And I think housing is an obvious choice. And this message has been supported recently by the likes of Robert Jenrick, Homes England, and other leading authorities. And it has also been linked to funding or the availability of funding. And funding will be key in all that we do. funding will help to accelerate and allow us to grow at pace. But it will also enable us to build the right sort of homes, particularly around quality, and particularly as we have a clear focus on environmental issues running up to the challenges of 2030 and 2050 and the net zero carbon agenda. I saw a presentation the other day, and I'm going to steal one of the quotes from that presentation because I thought it was a great point. We are probably the first generation who are really feeling the impacts of what we've done to the environment, but we're also probably the last generation who can really do something about it. So it definitely sits firmly on our shoulders that we have the opportunity and the responsibility to think about the environment, to build more sustainably, and support all that we do. At Faithful and Gould, we've really invested heavily and created a skill set about supporting our clients and communities in understanding social value. And we use a tool called the Social Profit Calculator, and we look at projects and business plans and how we're going to move forward, and we measure that often against 150, 160 plus matrix. We've been able to work with local authorities and councils, and in particular one London borough, where we've been able to demonstrate that for every £1 invested, we are able to turn in the region of £1.85 of social value back into communities, which I think you'll all agree is a great achievement. So we're drawing to an end of my part of the presentation today, and I thought I'd end on a forecast or a look forward to the future. And we've picked out 5 key areas. Homes. Homes underpin our well-being, underpin our health. They make us feel safe. They give us a place of belonging. But in delivering those homes, we need to make sure we protect the environment and the communities that we live in. So a clear focus on homes and being socially and environmentally responsible. Programs. We talk about programs because it's programs that deliver scale, not projects. Projects will make a small impact. We need programs of work to really deliver scale and to move at pace and to add value to the communities we live in. Planning. Planning is fundamental to all that we do when creating built assets, and we need planning policies that support our growth, but also protect what we're doing. I'm sure no one wants to see growth at the sacrifice of quality. So our planning process needs to support us in growing fast and acting as a catalyst, but also protecting the quality of the developments and the homes that we deliver. We've written government for the next item, but I think we could have also written institutional funds and investors, as funding and availability of funds underwrites all that we do and is a constant challenge. And then finally, of course, offsite or modern methods of construction. And again, I'd just like to reiterate, that's only where appropriate. We don't see MMC or offsite replacing what our partners and colleagues in the traditional construction approach deliver. We see it as building upon that starting point to add growth and really be a catalyst in the industry. So I'd just like to conclude by saying thank you for everyone. I look forward to going through some of your questions and hopefully having some really good discussion with the rest of the panel. If I can hand back now to Paula, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Please do start to drop your questions in. I think, you know, Andrew raised some really key points there for us to sort of hopefully engage with and look at. So, you know, what we're really interested to know is, you know, what's your experience with MNC, and is there any questions that you feel that you want to ask there? And what's your thoughts around, you know, the acceleration to help us out of the recession? I'm going to move on now and introduce David Rice, and David is going to share with you more from a service perspective around transforming the service offer. So obviously Guinness Care have been within the provision of services for a long time and have lived through many sort of changes in the environment and ups and downs in relation to the economy. So I'm looking forward to David's presentation, which I hope you are too. You want to take over, David?
Brilliant, thank you very much. So as Paula said, I work with Guinness Care. We're the care arm subsidiary of the Guinness Partnership, so a large national provider with 66,000 houses around the country. And as Guinness Care, we provide those care and support services to the services through the foyer or supported living services. But the majority of our work is very much with older people. We have supporting people in their own homes, also within development of extra care schemes, but also in housing for older people, more generally sort of more typical sheltered housing schemes around the country. And what I wanted to do through this presentation was really build on what Andrew had been talking about around sort of that desire for more homes and how we're building them, but then actually trying to work out, well, what are we going to be doing with those homes and how we're actually transforming our services. And again, it's the care, I think, as Paula was saying, we're always feeling that we're on that journey, that we're probably never going to get there because we're always going to be wanting to transform those services to make sure they're appropriate for the people who are living with us. So, sorry, there we go, sorry. So one of the things I think that we've been concentrating on is that if we're actually going to get that transformation, one of the things that we see is absolutely crucial is the leadership that we have to support that, and so how those leaders are going to be focused on that vision that we have of making sure that we're here to improve people's lives and create those possibilities for them. And I think one of the things that's been really exciting for us as a leadership team at Guinness is every fortnight we've been having heads of service calls as we've been going through the pandemic. It's been a real pleasure to see how our leaders through our services have really been supporting, how they've really been doing those things in that top part of that slide about acknowledging what's been happening, how they've been owning it and taking responsibility, how they've been really thinking about those solutions and actually being really key in making things happen for the people that we're supporting. But I think one of the things that we're saying now is what we're really wanting to develop further with our staff and leaders is around how do we actually move things on, but also the skills they need around what I've termed here is disruption and creativity and partnerships to actually make that difference and transform those services. I think interesting, just having listened to Andrew, that real similarity between the three things he started with and the three things there of disruption, creativity and partnership. So it's really interesting that's going through, and maybe that will come up in conversation later on. So what I wanted to do for the rest of my presentation was just maybe take those three themes and just talk about what we have been doing and how we've been exemplifying them in some of the projects and things that we've been doing. So starting with disruption, if you see on the graph on the left, we've been talking about how we actually do disruption. And for me, I think what we're saying is that data is actually really key in that disruption. And by disruption, I mean how we actually intervening with things that either behaviors or outcomes that we want to change to actually make that change for people. And I think the really interesting thing about that falls graph is just seeing as lockdown came in back around the March time, how we did see how those number of falls with our residents and people living with us actually did significantly increase, unsurprisingly, because perhaps as people were more restricted in their movements, they were staying more stationary. And so when they did start getting up, there were more likely to be falls. But what I think we're really pleased is how probably back then it was more intuition of people understanding what was happening to actually make sure there was a difference, how people were being encouraged to keep moving so that actually those falls did stop. And obviously you see it going up and down a bit, but really pleased to see how that gradual decline has actually been happening. And the second graph on there, hopefully you'll be able to read, I'm sorry that our print's so small, but one of the things that as an organisation, we really had to start again whilst lockdown happened, was that real more engagement with our customer welfare calls, perhaps almost something that was coming across as almost old hat, the welfare calls, and perhaps have been stopped more of. But our team across the 8,000 units, during that first month, they made 22,000 calls to our tenants supporting them. And it was really key how they actually were, through those calls, were actually bringing out what were the issues with the people we were supporting, so we could actually make sure we were doing the right things to help. And unsurprisingly, you can see there at the bottom that massive graph about how loneliness and social isolation was such a massive thing for so many of those people as they were talking to our independent living advisors about what they were experiencing. So having had that data, the disruption could then actually happen about actually what we could actually do to make the difference. So just put up there two things of some of the difference we've been. The first slide there is about sort of winter wellbeing plans, and that's a real thanks to Kat Stevens, who's our health and wellbeing advisor up in the north, and the plans that she's been put together, really feeding out of that information that had come in. Last week, the independent living advisors across the housing that they're supporting launched a winter walks initiative, where they were providing to those people who wanted to take part free pedometers, so they could measure the number of steps they were doing, encouraging people to get out, starting friendly competitions just to try and raise that profile and get that encouragement to be outside walking, especially when it was getting cold, and just encouraging people to be doing that. And then there's other things in there. So things which might seem quite old hat, about providing materials for Christmas cards, for making interactive Christmas tree decorations, for decorating windows. Things that are happening, but again, building on it. And perhaps the reason I really wanted to put that element in there, even though they might seem quite old hat, was just the importance of one responding to what the need is, and saying that we don't have to throw out everything that we've been doing before. Some of the things we've been doing have been there for good reasons, but also just about, as I think we're picking up from the happy hour session yesterday, we've been working really hard on design to create those opportunities where people can actually meet to talk. And one of the things I think that came out in one of the talks yesterday was about how do we actually create what they talk about. And I think this is a key element of, again, it's been how as across services we're actually creating those opportunities to utilise the design effectively. And the second thing I want to just highlight within the disruption was a programme that we've been working on at Guinness Care called Friends Against Scams. It's an initiative that's been launched by the National Trading Standard, and Guinness Care is actually the first housing association and care organisation that's signed up to support this. And it's very much about identifying that issue around the difficulty of scams that are underway and prevalent in society. With the statistics out that the average age of a person who succumbs to a scam being 75, that 53% of 65 and overs are actually being targeted at the moment. But only 5% of those scams that are anticipated are actually being reported. And I think one of the things we've seen during COVID as well has been how there's been a significant increase in scams, particularly around COVID. So horror stories, I expect many people already heard of, about criminals actually impersonating health workers on telephone calls with the intention right at the beginning of selling masks, but the masks that were being priced around the £40. And it was estimated that this network during the first 12 weeks of lockdown were making about 170,000 calls a week. And if you anticipate that 5% succumbed, that was actually buying masks at a cost of £4 million. And again, the majority of those people being older people. So we've wanted to engage with this as a real opportunity to actually help our staff to become more aware. And at Guinness Care, as part of our safeguarding process, we actually have what we call September as Safetember. And this year, our focus was around finance and financial abuse. And we really used our Friends Against Scams campaign to highlight that. And as an organisation, we've been using the scheme to hopefully train up to 500 people as Friends Against Scams. It's a great training program. It's only about 20 minutes, but just really helps people identify people who might be at risk of being scammed and supporting people to work out how to actually report what's being happened. And you'll see down at the bottom there, there's a link to the training. If you want to use that link, that will take you via the Guinness Care route and you'll help us reach our target of 500 people. But I really would recommend it as a well worthwhile 20 minutes to support, particularly where we're working with older people. But again, putting that up there now, because this is a real part of a disruption about actually making that change of where we want to see things and using that data to understand that. Second element of leadership that we were talking about was about creativity, and just wanted to highlight a project that we've been working on as an organisation in partnership with the Royal College of Art and Apello, who have really been supporting us with our new installation recently. And this was a project that was very much initiated to support where we were having some difficulties and wanting to really understand what were some of the challenges that were being faced by some of our tenants, particularly tenants as they were moving in, how we were actually creating communities that had that care and share and that belonging element to them, and enabling people to have that interaction and encourage that interaction. And the third part of this project was very much looking at how we could then take what was designed from its hard copy into something that could actually be digitized and be used that way by tenants. So what actually came out of the project, which was very much co-designed, it was working with two of our apartment blocks, was actually something that was called a community, which you can see the picture of it on the right-hand side, where the idea that the designer came up with in the co-production was actually a hard copy of a tree where people could actually use different symbols, so the leaves, the honeycombs, to actually link in to what was on offer, what views they had, and then also create ways in which people could interact with what was being said. That could be being done anonymously, or people could also own, but also gave staff supporting on the schemes the opportunity to feed back in as well, to say what's going on. And now the challenge that we've got within this community, as I said now, is we've got this wonderful resource, and the challenge as we move into phase 2 of this program is about how might we actually be able to digitize that to make it more accessible, whilst also realizing this has been a co-design project, and how transferable is that going to be into different scenarios. The third element of leadership that I wanted to build up on was around partnership, and how key that's been. And for the example there, I wanted to just highlight the Home from Hospital initiative that we started in Bristol in our extra care scheme there, Lincoln Gardens. And it very much came out of a collaboration with health colleagues and our commissioners at Bristol City Council, which we're very grateful for the way they've worked together with us and had that shared vision of understanding of a shared problem, how we could actually work on that together. And the outcome was that we utilised 4 of the flats at the scheme to be available for this Home from Hospital project, where through the commissioning, an agreed 10 hours of care per week was identified, but more could be then commissioned as needed for each of the people coming in. So it was 10 hours per each flat, and that people who might be moving in might be staying for between 6 to 12 weeks. And that then gave also the flexibility through that partnership of actually discussing and designing the operational development of the model as it went through. I think just sort of highlighting some of the outcomes for some of the people might just give a bit more of a feeling for how that project worked. So Mr. G came to us. He was in his late 50s. He had actually had an accident, and as a result, his leg had been amputated, and he had actually been in hospital for 8 months. And as a result of that, he was then very apprehensive about returning to live independently. So his time within the scheme was very much used to actually develop that independence. He actually really enjoyed his time living there and was contemplating staying permanently. But as things went through, we actually saw, we got him to say where he actually did want to be independent. He moved back to a new flat and actually took back up his job as a transport manager. So there are those sort of stories that were coming out and very different experiences and different ways it was used, but success of using that through partnership and joint design of that project. And I just wanted to finish off my presentation again, thinking about as we're moving forward and the challenges under those leadership qualities. So again, thinking about disruption, what I'd be saying is one of the things that we're experiencing as we, particularly within our extra care housing, is how we're almost feeling sometimes the model of extra care, particularly the services that are being commissioned, feeling under increasing pressure and anticipating that's going to be increasing pressure as we move forward with greater financial challenges for commissioners. But we're sort of really saying it's put up there sort of tongue-in-cheek of a protest, but about how are we going to, as a sector, really try and protect that model so that all that great investment, all that great energy that we put in for our extra care housing doesn't mean that we end up with sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek glorified sheltered housing schemes and that resource being lost. Secondly, around creativity. And for us, I think there are two areas of creativity that we want to see in development. One is around, we're very fortunate being part of a larger housing association. We have quite a few schemes where we're going to be building 800 to 1,000 units. We want to sort of do that challenge about within that, how can you actually build up dispersed extra care units or virtual extra care housing, which really maximize the benefits of intergenerational living, but also have the benefits of services being provided together to those communities. And the second thing with the creativity, I think we're feeling really challenged by is that we provide a lot of services in very rural areas through our care at home teams, and about how can we develop some of these services and models which are much more rural focused. So it's been great that Happy 4 had those elements about the rural element, but it's from the design perspective, but how do we now move that into with the services as well? And finally, around partnership. And I think one of the things again that we wanted to build on here was around our health partnerships. And I think we're seeing very much the challenges that have come out of COVID, particularly around the residential care home sector, about that challenge about how good, particularly with an extra care, have we really been about making it home for life, and with all the challenges of risk and managing that risk, have we moved away from it being for home for life, and how do we move it back, particularly working with health colleagues to really make sure that for those who want it to be their home for life, it really can be. So hopefully as we go into conversation later, those three areas of disruption, creativity and partnership might come again, but Paul, I'll hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. That's excellent. Hopefully everybody sort of enjoyed that. And I think some real sort of key pertinent questions there that I think hopefully will not just resonate some questions with everybody, but I think the other side of it is especially this year, it sits with all of us. So I think many of us have had, for example, a taste of loneliness and isolation through, throughout the year where we've been forced to work from home. And I know myself personally, even though I've been in this industry for a long time, when you experience that personally, you then start to empathise even more with those individuals that actually are faced with this every year as they're growing older and possibly don't have family or that network or living in an environment where they can actually socialise. So I think, it's a little bit like the exercise where somebody puts a blindfold on you so that you can experience losing your sight. I think that's what COVID has done to many of us this year in relation to loneliness and isolation. I'll share with you now the presentation that I've put together on Lifestyle by NJ. Apologies, just take that back off. All the best laid plans go to pot. Just as I load this up, for those of you that don't know NJ, NJ is a global organisation. We here in the UK, we specialise on the production and the supply of energy services and regeneration. And so the learning that I'm going to share today is not, there we go, sorry. For some reason, my screen is just not working. So we'll try again and go for a different method. Hopefully you can all see that now. So yes, I've shared with...
Sorry, Paula, sorry to interrupt you. We can't see your... Do you want me to share your slides? And
I'll just have one more shot at this then, Lois. I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening with it. I'll try again. Can we see that now?
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, if you just maximize full screen, then that's cool.
Are we okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Lovely, thank you. Apologies for that. The joys of virtual presenting, and I've fallen at the first hurdle, apologies. So yes, as I say, building on what we do as a business, I've shared with Housing LIN members and people across the industry over the past few years, the journey that we've been on in relation to developing lifestyle. Lifestyle now is live, and the experience I'm going to share with you today is how that's evolved and some of the challenges that we face, but I think a lot of the challenges that we face have actually led to some really productive and innovative ideas and solutions that we've developed with our customers. So lifestyle is an all-inclusive service, and I think that's the first thing that I would like to point out, is that the way that we've approached this is we've approached this as a product and service provider. So although, you know, they're very much focused around the innovation around the home itself and the living environment in which we're providing, that to us is the infrastructure, and that's how we've communicated with our customers and learned with our customers as we've progressed this initiative. So ultimately, you know, what we wanted to do is we wanted to basically take the research that we carried out with our customers, and we wanted to look towards the future and create products and services that were future proof as best as they could be. And I say that because, you know, just as we've experienced this year with COVID, there is always something that could come out that none of us were expecting, some form of pandemic or devastating factors that none of us could potentially plan for. However, in living through a lot of these experiences, I think the thing that we need to be is very bold to think about, just because we've always done it a certain way, then, you know, that's potentially not the right way to continue. So we took a very bold decision to challenge the status quo. We took the decision to take the really powerful learning from colleagues and organisations across the sector who have been for many years providing products and services for the older generation. And we took that learning and spoke with customers and, you know, gained from that what customers really aspired to and really expected us to deliver. From a place-based solutions approach was actually something that continued to build on that multi-generational community. Because ultimately, I think, you know, to ensure that what we've got is an energised and a connected community, then we need all ages to interact. And although there's a lot to be said for people who, I think the term has always been used, of like-minded people living together, there is also a whole host of things to be said about you're as young as you feel, and you're as young as your environment allows you to be. So in thinking about that, we thought very much about the build environment as the infrastructure, and what we were creating needed to be aspirational and domestic in its feel, but very practical in relation to how it supports people to age well. And so that comes into the fact around some practical things here, some examples that I thought I'd share with you, where we'd worked with our supply chain to look at inclusive design, but to take that inclusive design that has been around for many years, you know, let's face it, it's been there, but it's tended to be of a more clinical form. And ideally, you know, you ask yourself the question of, you know, would I like that in my home, or would that sort of scream to me that I'd lost something? I'd lost the ability to use something or to do something. And so therefore, how could we discreetly design, you know, people's homes and the fixtures and fittings within those homes to assist them, but at the same time, you know, not debilitate them from a mental point of view. And you know, and our mental health can be our worst enemy. So these sort of measures that we were taking were, again, engaging with the customer themselves, and asking them, you know, does, for example, you see the picture of the two kitchens there, if we started this project, we had the upper picture with the white kitchen that Moya, my colleague, was demonstrating to a customer that, you know, was quite clunky, quite clinical looking. And we changed that. You know, we worked, as I say, with the supply chain and said, okay, we need something to look a little bit more sexy. We need something that we'd be happy to have in our home, but is just as practical as the first measure. This is an example here of how we are addressing, through a services point of view, the isolation factor. So David raised the points about loneliness and isolation, and, you know, providing people the opportunity to continue to live in their own home, and in a home that has been designed to a lifelong standard, a home that has been, you know, tested in a sense to say, if at some point I needed to fit a through floor lift, would I actually fit it in that location? Because could I live with it in that location and look at it there every day? And to the practical thing of, by providing somebody with that lifelong home, then essentially achieving what they want to be, which is to stay at home, but then does that by default at certain times of the year or certain times in their life, resulting in them being isolated and lonely. So that the opportunity to interact and to connect with people and to socialise was absolutely key, and came out again loud and clear in the research that we did with customers. And so what we decided to do is, again, to not, you know, to not follow just the traditional approach of, you know, we are not providing big apartment blocks, so therefore we haven't got a lounge within the apartment block. We haven't taken an extra care approach where all the facilities are within the extra care block. We are creating communities with a mix of housing types, from bungalows to houses to cottage flats to apartments, that ultimately we want everybody to have the same access to the opportunity to interact and socialise. And so this is the community hub. Charles Waterton House is an actual picture of the completed building on our first development in Wakefield, which is Waterton Green in Walton, and it was named after Charles Waterton, who himself was you know, an absolute sort of thought leader of his time in relation to nature and bringing many species back to to this particular area of Wakefield, and building this nature reserve. And so we felt it was quite apt, and we asked the family's permission to name the hub after him. But within the hub, what we have within there is, this is a 2-storey building. It is located right at the entrance to the development to connect the new development to the existing community. And it is there to serve a purpose for the whole community. So it's about localised solutions, but it's very much focused on well-being. So the well-being side of it is for the whole community as much as for our residents. And it's about, what does a community need to sustain sort of the well-being approach to service and interaction and socialisation. So we've engaged with a number of local organisations, one of them being the local hospice, who is very keen to be reaching out into the community with services including holistic therapy and bereavement counselling that is traditionally provided just within the hospice. And so again, looking at it differently and saying, you know, can we reach this out into community and reach more people? And the hospice are very engaged with us on this. And obviously, as we know, hospices are dependent on fundraising and don't, you know, receive the contribution from the state. And therefore, what we're also working with them to do is to run the community cafe. So we've designed in a community cafe within the building. This sits adjacent to the area that has been designated for the community library. A local voluntary group run the community library following its closure a few years back through the local authorities programme. And it's a very active volunteer group who run a number of activities and engage with the local school. And so we've got that true multi-generational connection, and what they're working together to do is to create almost like this Waterstones feel. So, you know, a shake up again of what does a community library look like and how does it work with other stakeholders to enable people to come in, have a coffee, choose a book, have a read, you know, maybe buy some retail stuff while they're there. We've got a local pharmacy who has submitted an application to the NHS because this community lost its pharmacy many years ago. And again, you know, what the parish council and the local community is saying is they don't want to have to get in a car to drive to go to the chemist, etc. And then a newcomer, sort of fairly recent newcomer, who's sort of quite excited about the potential, is a hearing specialist. And so ultimately, again, it's about reaching out and providing those services within the community that typically you'd have to go to a health centre or a hospital or into the high street. So that can we actually get these in the community? And not forgetting our residents, what we have up on the first floor is the executive lounge. Now this is for the residents to use as they wish, and that can be completely open if they wish to do that, or completely closed, but ultimately it's their choice. From a carbon footprint point of view, what we've very much focused on throughout developing the products and the services that we provide through Lifestyle fit with our core values as a business. And as a business, we are obviously 100% committed to the carbon, zero carbon transition. And the solutions that we are very focused on providing is place-based solutions. So I made a point earlier on when I was opening up this session in relation to our homes and what they produce in relation to that carbon footprint. And there's another key fact here that 80% of homes that will be in place by 2050, which is obviously zero carbon target, are already here. This isn't about new homes just being future-proof. You know, this is our development in Wakefield. And as you can see, we put, you know, PVs on there as standard. The additional insulation and you know, the true energy efficiency of the home is built in as standard. But existing homes, you know, are not typically built to that standard. And the grants that have been made available from the government to upgrade our homes, you know, have been there, haven't been successful in some instances, in other instances are, but ultimately we have an issue there with our existing homes. So another initiative that we've taken, we've just launched this year, is Energy Zero. Now this is about a whole house retrofit. And this is taking, again, our expertise and thinking around how can we put a package together that not just local authorities, housing associations and others can look at from a whole stock point of view, but individuals themselves can look at, well, how can I take control and how can I look to bring my home to that net zero? So I think really it's about, how we engage and we collaborate, and there's some wonderful language that's been already used by my colleagues this morning that fits completely with it. This is about, innovating and creating, but it's very much about absolutely collaborating. Not one organisation is going to be able to address these challenges on our own. And, I love sort of David's point about disruption, because, it's only by disrupting things that actually some really great ideas come forward. And so it's, we'll be addressing a lot of this through the communities that we will deliver. I'd like to just sort of end now sort of towards this presentation in just thinking a little bit about location, because again, when we think about, how do we develop age appropriate, whether it be schemes, whether it be communities, or the services, we often think about location, because location can very much influence what it is that we need to provide. And that can be due to the local economy. So is this an affluent area? Is this a deprived area? It can be in relation to the skill set. So, from a workforce point of view, from a supply chain point of view. But I think the key thing to me, which is why I'm putting this up, is, again, we need to be quite bold, and we need to think about, actually, do you know what? People live in all different walks of life. So why shouldn't people have the same choice, no matter what economic background or race or diversity they come from? So, that's where the location comes in from my point of view. And this slide is our next development, which, it is, yes, it's a coastal town. The estate that you see below that, it is shown there. This is farmland that's owned by the local authority and by a developer. But the estate below was the ex-local authority social housing development, very large development, circa 2,000 homes. It was a stock transfer. And this is about a huge, major regeneration project, and we're going to be part of that, and we're going to, look at what infrastructure we provide with a lifestyle focus to a multi-generational approach. And the fact is that communities develop over time, so it doesn't matter whether they're urban or rural or semi-rural. People do want the choice to live where they want to live, and so I think it's our responsibility as a sector to rise to that challenge, to collaborate, to use the strengths and expertise that we have to pull together and create places that actually provide those opportunities and promote that integration and interaction. Co-production, again, is a key thing that's been said earlier by my colleagues, but is absolutely essential for us to be making some big steps forward. On the location thing, you look at this this picture and you think, well, what the heck has this got to do with housing? But this again is where we're making sort of a very big statement in Staffordshire. Just over 3 years ago, our chief executive made a very bold commitment in relation to that we as a business were going to go zero carbon. And therefore, our fossil fuel power stations, we were going to close. And this is the one in Staffordshire that we immediately went into the process of closing. This doesn't look like this now. Those towers are down. The demolition is very well on. And we are in the planning processes of planning a whole new community of circa 2,500 new homes, commercial, education, retail, that will be brought forward. So a focused infrastructure around the lifestyle of people. And so therefore the lifestyle by energy product, which has obviously been developed with older people in mind, has had a great influence on this. And we will be in various pockets across that 2,500 homes. So I think, again, it's how we can really take something that's quite nasty and make it beautiful. So this is where I'd like to finish off with everybody now, and it's just a sort of a few questions and add into my colleagues' questions from earlier to just provoke you to sort of start bringing your questions forward. And I can see that there are some questions that are coming in that we'll move on to and answering, you know, but we are hugely behind. We're still, you know, in this process of delivering just over 3,000 homes a year that are specifically for over 55s. So I think, you know, that poses a question to me in itself, is this just about specifically over 55s, or is this about the housing market looking at it differently? And, you know, I think there will be views on both sides. It's inevitable there is a need for specialist housing, absolutely inevitable, if we're going to avoid people having to spend their final days in hospital. And, you know, it's sort of a great point there in relation to, you know, the home from hospital scheme that Guinness Care, and I know many other organisations have been looking or have had their own experiences with that as well, is, you know, I truly believe that we all have a right to pass away at home. And, you know, and ultimately, again, we need to look at how we facilitate it. And in relation to sort of how can we stimulate and you know, look at a wider range of supply, what I hope to be sharing with members over the early part of next year is the conclusion of a project that we've been carrying out in relation to MMC, because the challenges that I found with MMC personally, and you know, I've been within the sector a number of years, is the products that we've developed through the Lifestyle by Engie brand are a challenge for modular and volumetric suppliers to deliver without certain compromises. And we've been not prepared to make those compromises, because ultimately it's achieving that lifelong standard that we're guaranteeing to our customers. We have had some breakthroughs in this last month, where the reports are being finalised now, but it's looking hopeful that we will potentially have 2 solutions that will be able to deliver, and we're looking at a partnership with those organisations to look at accelerating the delivery of Lifestyle by Engie homes, and really sort of trying to sort of again drive forward that, you know, we can blend the two. You know, some sites will very much lend themselves to more of a more traditional build, but again, it doesn't have to be fully traditional. There are measures that we're already taking in relation to energy efficiency. We can do the same in relation to methods of construction. And the other question I think that I wanted to put on here was around the pitfalls that there are for new entrants. And so some of you listening today, you know, maybe within organisations that are either at the start of the journey or just thinking about, is this a market space that you should be moving into or want to move into? So, you know, yes, there are pitfalls in a sense, I suppose, but I would quite obviously say there are also some huge opportunities, because I think, you know, anything is absolutely possible. So I'd like to bring my presentation to an end there, and that ends the 3 presentations for this morning, and I'd like to very much now move on to the questions and answers that hopefully myself and my panelists, if we can put the cameras back on, guys, and the mics, and hopefully between the 3 of us and other colleagues that are in the background are going to be able to answer some of those questions. We've got a question here, and some of them we've got who they're actually being posed to, and in others not. So there's a couple that I picked up very early on that while I scan over these questions that are here, I'll just trigger off. There was one question, Andrew, that came up very early in your presentation, and that was around the definition of off-site.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, good question. As I said in my presentation, government have tried to help us around definition and categorisation through their guide to modern methods of construction. But for me, fundamentally, off-site can be construction, can be manufacturing, can be fabrication can be componentized. It's taking more of those delivery methodologies and putting them in a controlled environment. Now that could be a manufacturing facility, it could be it could be a workshop, it could be a lab, it could be anything, but taking them away from the traditional construction site outside of the red line boundary, and then really measuring the success of that against the matrix I talked about. And the obvious ones are things like health and safety and productivity and certainty around deliverability and quality. So you know, we could list out a whole long list of things that are off-site, but it's fundamentally doing more away from the traditional construction site, and then measuring the impact of that against those matrix and others that are set out.
Thanks, Andrew, that's great. And there's a couple of questions here for you, David, and if I can give them both for you, and if you can cover the two really, because there's a bit of a technology angle to both. So again, one of the early questions that came up, and this came up during your session, was what sort of technology have you used to support people who are lonely and socially isolated? And then secondly, I think if you can expand on somebody here, again, we've got an anonymous question, but it's virtual extra care sounds very interesting. So, you know, it's a question there around care in rural areas is usually difficult to purchase. So how have you solved that issue?
Yeah. Well, if I start off with the technology question, I'm sure their colleagues around Guinness Care will be shooting me for having left bits out. To me, it seems that three particular things that I'd want to highlight that we've probably been doing. We have had a significant alarms reinstallation project, sort of helping to sort of retrofit and upgrade a lot of our apartment blocks. Been working with the Pello on that. So, and that has the capacity to also support with interaction between tenants who are living there as well. So that's one of the parts that we've been doing. A second is we have also been doing a project of tablet loans as well, and then sort of supporting people with being able to use those and help them to actually overcome some of the issues around lonely and isolation through that. And the third thing, which I think technology which we quite often forget about, is the phone, because we're saying actually, you know, we did 22,000 phone calls in that first month. Some of those might be through landlines, but a lot will also be to mobile phones. And I think I was always surprised when in the previous role, we actually did a survey of the people who were living in our shelter housing schemes at the time, of how many people had access to technology, and the majority of them said they didn't. But then when they were asked, did they have a mobile phone? Actually, I think it was about 70%. So it's about actually that acknowledgement of actually how important what people already have was really important within that. And then Paul, sort of moving on to the second question, I'd love to say I have all the answers to this, but I think what I'm just trying to say is that within this, I think it's really trying to open up this conversation. For me, around the virtual extra care, in my head, where I've been thinking about that has been particularly around larger schemes, more inner city, and within the Guinness partnership, where we're very fortunate, we do have one site that is very close to a train station with commuting distance to London, where there obviously will be a lot of interest in those flats through different tenure mixes. But then what to me the excitement is, but what if you could actually put some designated housing for older people within that, which actually formed a virtual extra care unit as well within that, and sort of trying to think that through. And then perhaps that virtual then does start linking into the rural. I absolutely agree. Sort of the funding, you know, as an organisation, we'd normally be saying for an extra care scheme, we wouldn't really want to look at anything below 60 because of the viability of size. But how do you actually then make that work in the rural community? And part of that is probably going to be about virtual, but I think it's also partly about rethinking of the services that actually go into those housing units to support, and having to be creative around that element too.
Yeah,
Paula, can I just come in briefly? Because I think David raises a number of really important issues here. And some of the virtual schemes that the LIN has seen over the years, it's been very much built on because of a challenge of getting workforce in to rural communities. I think what COVID has shown is, yes, there is still that challenge, but actually going digital has also enabled workforce to be supported and enabled to provide care and support, but more importantly, residents to take greater control around their health and well-being, or for the first time, being able to articulate some of their health concerns and types of outcomes they want with staff who perhaps always thought, you know, they go to the GP or go and see your community pharmacy. So the fact that you talk about, you know, how to engage with pharmacy as well at Waterton Green, those sort of things I think are really important step forwards and creating those hubs.
Absolutely, Jeremy, and I was just going to add some of the same sort of comments really in relation to, I think that when it comes to care and support, we again could fall into the trap of thinking the traditional social care and health and personal domiciliary care and support, where actually, the virtual thing to me is looking at, well, let's break that down. And what does an individual actually need, and how through the digital world can we actually put in sense, first of all, the infrastructure. So, the sort of the revamp that you're doing at the moment, David, of your existing schemes and many others are doing, is thinking sort of more creatively about, from a digital world, what can that platform provide for somebody? And then from a workforce point of view, that you can never take away that human interaction. To me, virtual is never going to fill the gap totally. We need that continual human interaction. But does that human interaction have to be a professional workforce? We've got a huge cohort across the country of the voluntary sector, and volunteers who wish to support each other, and not just from a befriending services, but from some other practical tasks. So how can we blend the two together? And then to me, it comes back to that place-based solution. So, if it's a challenge for an organisation, because the way that the organisation is geared is, yes, it needs to be a minimum of 60 units to actually invest in development, then actually through a collaboration with another developer or the local authority, can actually, the investment in the structure, in the infrastructure, come from elsewhere. But the investment from the point of view of services and expertise come through that method. So I think there's some exciting opportunities to expand the thinking around virtual and where we're going from there. There's a couple of questions on here that are sort of targeted more towards myself, and I'll accept your apologies, Jim, for getting a bit technical this morning. But yeah, thanks for asking the question in relation to the Energy Zero retrofit programme. Yes, the focus is obviously around the net zero transition, but you're quite right to raise the question in relation to, is the measures for cooling as well as heat retention? And the answer is absolutely yes, because this has been proven to be a real issue of, the more that we insulate our homes, then in a sense we're bringing almost like this greenhouse effect into the home, so we're all getting hotter inside. And so yes, it very much does get the balance. So it does a calculation and looks at it in great detail around what measures are required on that particular dwelling to ensure that there is a controllable temperature that supports well-being, to in a sense prevent that overheating. And there was another question that I'll just cover off at the same time, which is jumping about. So that was basically around, does a solution include retrofitting, including disabled access? Again, yes. So again, building from what we've learned and what we do within the lifestyle offer. So the lifestyle offer comes with a whole suite of options and adaptations that you can have either put in at the point of purchase or retrofit. So the work that we've done on how do we successfully retrofit with where possible avoiding major works has also been adopted, because the business will be delivering the Energy Zero, but also be looking at it from a lifestyle option. So if a customer is wanting to, in a sense, upgrade the accessibility of the home at the same time as looking at energy efficiency, then we would just combine the two retrofit solutions in that. So if we move back on then to, this isn't saying who this is addressed at, but it's saying what adaptations should be considered for houses and apartments specialised for those with autism. David, would you like to put any comments into this? And then I'll.
Sorry, to be honest, I think we haven't got any experience of that, so I wouldn't want to be adding comment on that, I don't think, at the moment.
Right, okay. I mean, from my point of view, I have got minimal experience from past roles of where we did provide housing for people with autism, people with learning disabilities, and other challenging disorders, really. And to me, a lot of the principles that are promoted and provided within the extra care setting absolutely work from the same sort of principles around, you know, how we should be thinking about homes being adapted, because, you know, it's around that ease of access, it's around the ability for an environment to be calm, and it's around the access to technology to support not just the individual but the carers of those individuals. Don't know if anybody else, whether Jeremy's got any comments he'd like to add there.
Yeah, on the autism side, I see Lois has put something in from one of my team on to answer as well. But just to say that the Housing LIN's been working with NHS England to better understand the Transforming Care programme, who are responsible for looking at the future provision of housing and care for people with learning disability or autism. And they are looking at producing a design guide specifically. But some of the things that are already emerging from the learning and lessons we've sort of observed are very much around the acoustics, around sound insulation, around noise proofing, and also about having better quality light, let alone access to digital. There's a lot of people with autism who are using gaming, both for enjoyment and lifestyle, but also support their care packages as well. So again, there's some really important thing about how we adapt and retrofit, but also how we build in new. Yeah, so again, the Housing LIN actually has a dedicated page on this on its website, and we'll put that up on the chat box.
Yeah.
Okay. Rather than, unless I'm missing, there's some comments on here that I'd just like to share with people. Keith made the comment about we should nurture natural caring and counselling services. Absolutely agree with that, and I think that fits back in as well, very much to the virtual extra care. It's a key part of it is, you know, engaging with organisations who can provide those services. We've got another one here about we're here to improve lives and create possibilities. This is very important and needs to be given much more emphasis if people are going to downsize whilst in relatively good health in old age. And I feel this is overlooked and would like to see this point expanded on by the speaker from Guinness Care, and that's coming from Jess. So David, if you'd like to respond.
Absolutely. I think I very much agree with Jess. I think one of the challenges, again, particularly going back to the viability of care within a lot of extra care schemes, is often meant that the models I've sort of often talked about of a third care needs have often changed and moved much towards the higher care needs, which absolutely right, as you're just saying, sort of then moves that away from that encouragement of people in good health moving into this type of accommodation. I suppose I think I think probably unfortunately haven't talked about much this morning is about how we actually, it's not only about communities being inward looking that we're developing here, but we also very much outward looking too, that are encouraging people to think about that. So it actually does feel like a good option for people. It's not about creating a community which then has razor wire all around it. It's about actually a community which is then a hub going out to people as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on to that, you know, the work that we've done and you know, sort of in quantifying what customers' experience is and what their aspirations are. We've very much moved away from the whole term downsize. to, you know, to people who are looking to right size. And I think there's something that we need to really embrace within the industry, and that's language. So you know, if we look at the language that we use when we're engaging with communities and with customers and with commissioners and providers, it's very much around, you know, what are the choices? You know, some of the things we're talking about here this morning is around choices. What choices we're creating, and downsizing it is still, to very many people, not something they're looking forward to. You know, it's not something they're running at arms open and embracing. Whereas, you know, when you're right sizing, that's personal to you. That's about I'm grabbing something and I'm going out and I'm looking for something that's right for me. It's the right size for me. It's the right fit for me, you know, and it's going to work. And that's where something that I think, you know, we need to do, because you're absolutely right, Jess. You know, the biggest chance that we've got of addressing the huge burden that we've got on our health and social care sector is actually by encouraging people to take responsibility and actually, you know, move into the right environment sooner, before they actually need to, you know, because that's what's going to help care services and health services, is because they're going to deal with the things that actually wasn't preventable. Whereas at the moment, they're having to deal with everything, even a lot of the stuff that are preventable. And so, you know, it's I think language is a key thing for me. And I think, you know, the organisations in the sector, in particular around extra care, for example, have been scratching their heads for many years of, we came up with the reference extra care when it all evolved and came about, but as that in fact turned into a little bit of a poison chalice, because is it actually saying the right thing? You know, we keep debating, should we rebrand extra care? You know, that seems to be a theme, Jeremy, every year, doesn't it? We get it brought up at the annual conference. So I think you know, that would be the thing to me, is let's look at the products and services, make them aspirational, make them meet expectations, and start to think very much about language that we use. We're coming to the end. I'm just looking at the clock, Lois. I don't know how tight we're being around clocks, but we've come up sort of to the end of the 1.5 hour. I just want to do another scan of the questions and make sure we've answered all of the questions. Thank you for the person that said there was some parts. A good example. That's very nice to know.
Hi, Paula.
Yes.
Hi, Paul, it's Andrew. Yeah, there was a question from Andrew, I think it's up in Edinburgh, around social value, okay, which I responded to as a written response, actually, to cover it off. But yeah, if people want to understand social value and how social value is calculated and can inform decision making, then I'm quite willing to mobilise some of my colleagues and do a further presentation or meet up with people to talk them through that. That's partly a get out of jail for me, because it is quite an expertise, and I'm not claiming to be an expert in it myself. But also I think it works best when we can visually present how the calculator works and some of the outputs delivered from it.
Okay, and then there's one here about equal access to the warm home discount scheme that allows equal access to a well-heated dwelling. Have you seen much take up from the point of view of your residents, David, within this?
Again, I wouldn't have the detail, I'm afraid, but happy to try and find out the feedback, Paula.
Right, okay, I think if we will, I think we'll post some answers back on that. Because again, it's another one of those schemes that is available, and are we communicating that, I suppose, well enough to all of the customers who are living within housing with care, as well as the general public? Because I think, yes, absolutely of benefit. What we don't want is people who are living and sitting and not wanting to turn the heating on. I think last one here is Ben. The session focuses on community and are there any examples of cross-sector collaborations with service providers that are either local or regular visit development that have worked well in terms of wellbeing projects? I mean, I think one I can share with you here, and colleagues may have one to share with you as well, so I'll give them time to think. One I'd like to share with you is actually the project that I put up on the screen, which was the collaboration between the local authority and the developer in Scarborough, which is where we're about to start the next lifestyle development in the new year. That's a long-standing project that's been very much focused around well-being and very much focused around collaboration. It's around well-being of multi-generational. So as I've made the point, it's the land sat alongside a deprived area, high levels of unemployment, skills problems, crime issues in the past, increasingly aging demographic, very poor housing for older people, and a deteriorating care home and service on the site. So there was a partnership that was established between the two landowners, who were the council and Kebble Homes, who owned the farmland to the north, and they engaged with the local community and all the stakeholders and all of the commissioners, including the county council, health, social care, and others, to shape the master plan, basically, that focused very much on how could they turn this farmland through a regeneration project into something that would re-energise and, in a sense, focus on improving the well-being of the existing population as well as the new. So the very first development that went on that new master plan site was actually an extra care housing scheme. So it was a 60-unit extra care housing scheme that had retail units built into the communal facilities, that were sat on a boulevard, that opposite there would be a new primary school that will be delivered with a mugger, with activity space and community hall within it, affordable housing as well as new family homes, and then lifestyle is following along in the next phase. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a feel of, you know, how collaboration across the public and private sector can actually really generate some great outcomes that's focused on the well-being of a whole community, but by default, in a sense, is improving both the services and the provision for older people, because now, you know, there is a skills village on site that provides people with opportunity around skills in construction. There is the extra care that's providing opportunity for careers and services around services to older and vulnerable people. And there is also the retail outlets, which again is providing that. So there's a whole host of social value that's come out of just that collaboration and that development. Have you guys got any projects you'd like to share?
I can give some examples, Paula, of where we're working on projects that follow similar themes to you set out there, although because of various NDAs and other things, I won't name clients or locations. But yeah, we've been involved in quite a lot of new development, either as extensions of existing towns and villages or placemaking in its own right. And very much focused on some of the points you talked about around multi-generational communities, and how by having, you know, everyone from a newborn right the way through to somebody approaching 100, how that can add value to the community, and what that might look and feel like, and of course making that very diverse and inclusive as well. So people who do join that community as a first-time buyer or renter feel they can stay within the community but progress to bigger homes as their families and needs dictate. But likewise, you know, those people that have brought up their families in the community and are now looking to right size it, as you put it, feel like there's the housing stock and the offer there, whether that be for sale or to rent, to stay within the community, within their friendship groups, and and contribute in that way. I would say what we've also seen, particularly from some of our funder and our operational clients, and lessons learned from other parts of the residential sector is we've seen a lot of our build to rent clients now really showing an interest in how they can integrate later living, co-living and extra care into their build to rent schemes. Again, so they've got a broader view on who their target audience is and then how that community works. So the old fashioned build to rent target audience all got up, went to work, disappeared and all came back in the evening. And now they're looking at ways of actually building assets and attracting people to those communities that create footfall and activity through the day, which supports retail and the high street. And really creates that community feel that we've talked about throughout this presentation.
Thank you.
Well, can I just add that the session's been fantastic to look at those issues. We have got another happy hour this afternoon called Collaborate, and if people are interested in other examples, the ones that you, David, and Andrew have cited, we're actually publishing and launching a new directory, an online directory on different models of supporting people at home, including a section on health and well-being. So if people are interested, do join us again later on this afternoon.
Thank you. Well, I think on that note, I'll bring this to a close. Jeremy, I'd like to thank the speakers, I'd like to thank Andrew and David for your contributions. I'd like to thank all the participants for the questions that you've sent through. And I'd just like to share with you sort of the key words for me that have captured throughout this session that I hope resonates with all of you and we can all take forward collectively. And that's innovate and collaborate, disruption, creativity and partnerships, co-designing for lifelong. And so I think that's really from us to you. I think those are the key messages that we'd like to leave everybody with. We hope you have a great rest of the day. We hope you enjoy the rest of the week, enjoying the happy hours that are coming along throughout the week. I sat within the Christmas tree because I wanted to finish by wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. It's going to be different this year, but this year has been different all along. So hey, what the hell. So have a great time the rest of the week. Thank you for participating, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon in person. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you, Paula.
Bye.